Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Deborah, the civil ceremony, the civil ceremony, celebrity, then now beyond. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Toastmasters. I'd like to begin tonight with a question. What can you tell me is civil celebrancy? Does anybody know what civil celebrancy is? James?
An unordained person carrying out a marriage ceremony. Somebody who is a civil celebrant. They can perform a marriage, but they don't have to be a member of a church.
Anybody else? Does everyone believe it's an unordained person? In actual fact, civil celebrancy can be conducted by a religious minister. Civil celebrancy, all that means is that it is a ceremony that is conducted using poem or prose, writing or readings, music and song to the wishes and beliefs of the person that the ceremony is being designed for, and not to that who is actually performing the ceremony. So basically, a priest can perform a civil ceremony. Fully religious, a little bit of religion, or non-religious or secular. The same as someone who is totally non-religious or secular can perform civil ceremony. There is no distinction here at all. Ceremonies or civil ceremonies can be to mark any important or major event for a particular person or even a community. It's not just designed for weddings or funerals, commitment ceremonies, same-sex commitment ceremonies, namings, coming of age, retirements, housewarmings, perhaps an opening of a premise that you often see in the community. A new building is being opened, they cut the ribbon, that's a ceremony. It could be a civil ceremony, or you may have a minister performing a religious ceremony. There is no problems with anyone performing that ceremony, but that's what it's all about. Now, looking back to the history of ceremonies, medieval Europe used to conduct wedding ceremonies purely by a man and woman agreeing to be husband and wife. That was it. All they had to do. So basically, you could turn up to a building, there may be someone there, there may not. You agree to be a husband and wife, and congratulations, you're married. How easy is that? That was medieval Europe. Then, as time went on, they decided in the 1700s that they would actually conduct a proper ceremony by having two witnesses. Again, nothing extra or particularly legal or no paperwork involved or anything like that. Just, I'd have two people here, a man and a woman say, I'm going to get married, congratulations. That was the end of it. In Scotland in the 1800s, one of the Scotsmen decided that basically a blacksmith could perform a wedding. A minister could perform a wedding. Anyone could perform a wedding. But that was not good enough according to the government. They decided that they would like to crack down on who could really perform a wedding. So in the end they decided that it would have to be some form of religion involved, and they would have to have the two witnesses there. So in the 1800s they declared a legislation that would perform only if you were a religious minister and you had two witnesses present. And that began the recording of particular marriage ceremonies. In 1566, however, a little while before then, the Council of Trent decided that everyone would have to have a Catholic religious ceremony performed by a priest in front of two witnesses. So the UK separated themselves for many, many years from what the Scots were doing, which was at that stage, as they just having two people declare themselves as husband and wife. Later on, the Scots actually invented or started using hand-fasting ceremonies. Has anyone here heard of a hand-fasting ceremony? A hand-fasting ceremony is basically this. A husband and wife, or to-be, would put their hands together as such, and then they would have some form of cloth or scarf or ribbon to clasp their hands together whilst they pronounce themselves as husband and wife. That's all that was as well. So again, just a little bit of a symbolic ritual, but to create some form of nice moment of the day. In 1792, Napoleon was in power, and during the French Revolution, he decided that religion was no longer to play a part in any form of marriage ceremony. He declared that from now on, a religious ceremony for a wedding was no longer legal. So if you wanted to get married, you had to have a civil ceremony. There was no choice. If you wanted to have a religious ceremony, sure, you could do that. But you would actually have to have the civil ceremony first. You could then have a religious ceremony, but even so, it would not be recognised as having been conducted. So there's no legality behind the actual ceremony itself. Germany was very similar, and in actual fact, they lived by that principle up until as recently as 2008. In 1972, Australia's Attorney General, Lionel Murphy, has anyone heard of him? Some of us old know Lionel Murphy. Lionel Murphy, he was the pioneer for Australian civil marriage celebrancy. In 1972, he was tired of hearing about how everyone had to go and have a religious ceremony when they didn't believe in religion. They had to have a religious funeral service when they didn't believe in religion. And basically they were discriminated against and humiliated. There's nothing worse if you don't believe in something that you're forced to actually say that you believe in it purely to be married or to be buried. So in 1972, for 2 years, he fought in government for the power of legislation to be passed to allow civil ceremonies, including marriage and funerals and any other form of major event. So at the end of 1973, Lois Darcy was formally authorised by Australian law to perform the first civil marriage ceremony. And to this day, we now have nearly 12,000 civil celebrants. We have approximately 90,000 weddings every year, and of those, more than 80% are performed by civil celebrants, which equates to roughly 72,000 ceremonies every year. So even those who are religious, there's a lot more than that. There are 20% of Australians that are religious, but they still choose as non-practicing religious people to have a civil ceremony. So the future of